Before we get into today's episode, I want to take a moment to tell you why I've made clinician retention the focus of my work and where the show is going. I've spent years inside healthcare systems. I've seen what happens when the structure isn't set up to allow clinicians to do their best work. I've watched talented clinicians leave organizations that could have kept them. Not because the problems were insurmountable, but because no one had diagnosed them clearly enough to fix them. Here's what I know. The drivers of clinician turnover are identifiable. They're fixable, and the organizations that solve them aren't doing anything magical. They've just finally started looking in the right places. That's what this show is about. Every episode is built around the structural conditions that cause clinicians to leave, what works, what doesn't, and what executives can actually do about it. If you lead a health system, a medical group, or a clinical division, and you're tired of watching good clinicians walk out the door and go down the street to your competitors, you're exactly who I'm talking to. Now let's get to it. Welcome to Designing Healthcare That Cares, the show where we explore how to build healthcare systems where people and performance thrive. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Suttin, a physician, coach, and healthcare leader who believes that human flourishing and organizational excellence go hand in hand. Each week, I talk with leaders, change makers, and innovators about how to shift culture, lead with purpose, and tackle the root causes of burnout. Because when healthcare works for the people in it, everyone wins. Welcome to the Designing Healthcare That Cares podcast. I'm super excited to have my guest today. She's a return guest. Dr. Melissa Milanak is a licensed clinical psychologist, a sleep expert, founder of Mind Impact Consulting LLC, and a professor at the Medical University of South Carolina. Dr. Milanak, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be invited back. I'm excited to get to talk with you again.
Yeah. So if you missed part one of our discussion, it was phenomenal. And we finished it. We'll put the link in the show notes. We said we have to come back and do a part two because there's so much more to talk about with sleep. And we were just, again, talking about what is going to be helpful to you all, the audience in a healthcare environment. And we don't want to rehash part one, but just, again, a reminder that sleep is necessary. It's a biological imperative. It's not a luxury. And a lot of us wore this lack of sleep as a badge of honor. So I definitely want to dive in, just thinking about the people that I serve as day-to-day clinicians, but also clinicians in leadership roles. And I see this so much in my previous role as a physician leader, as a medical director, what was modeled for me, and then really thinking about what's the impact on what I'm modeling for other people. And I feel like clinician leaders have this sense of, well, I have to do everything perfectly and be perfect in order to get my job done, but not always realizing that people are watching not just their language, but their behaviors. And so this emailing late at night and waking up super early to get work done, the sacrifice of sleep doesn't change when clinicians move away from full-time clinical roles or move into more administrative roles. I think it gets worse because a lot of times now my clients are working, they're being asked to work 2 full-time jobs. And you're in academia too. I'm sure you see this among academicians too, with your clinical work, maybe your research and education. I see you nodding. And so how does a busy clinician leader prioritize sleep amongst everything else that has to get done?
Well, I'm nodding for a few reasons because I think that you see for the leaders, right? So when someone is doing mostly just direct practice, there's a bit of this understanding, okay, they're going to have night shifts and they're going to need to be able to rest and sleep. And I think sometimes when you move to a leadership role, your desk job, if you're not, just because you might not, but as a leader, you often are still on call. Living here in Charleston, they're the person getting the call when the hurricane is coming through or what's happening with the weather. And you're still on, or you still get the emergencies or the crises, but now it's across all different areas and you have to constantly be on. So I think that there's that shift of you may not be in an actual patient room, but it's not like the on-call shuts off. And then on top of that, the stresses and feeling like you're responsible for even more people and more administration and feeling that weight, the higher up you go, the more lonely it can become and the more of that pressure that you feel. And so as you're taking more and more on, because either you can't share that information or you're having heavier things, now you are taking that home with you in even different ways. So you go throughout the day, you're busy, you don't have a moment of downtime, and then you climb into bed, and that's when your brain just takes off, because when did you have time all day to stop and to process?
Yeah. So true. And you mentioned the isolation, and this is something that I certainly felt, and I see it in my clinician leader clients. And it's something that I work really specifically with clinician leaders on. And I was in a peer group once, and now I was tapped to be in this leadership role. Now my peer group are reporting to me. I can't go to them the same way that I used to and talk about some
Mhm.
of these things because they won't understand. And they think I've sold out because I am now in this administrative role. I'm not as active in patient care, all of these feelings that come up. And so this isolation is really, really key. I talk about it a ton in my clinician leadership compass course. And I created that so clinician leaders didn't feel so isolated, because that in and of itself leads to burnout. But then there's the overwhelm and the
Mhm.
fatigue and the frustration. And then you mentioned something really key too. I don't know if you meant it this way, but these things that come up for clinician leaders that they can't talk about. And
Yeah.
so I don't know if you meant that as like, well, they hear things that are confidential or they're having discussions that are confidential, but that's true. That's so true. I led our peer review process for years in my previous role. And I was in closed door meetings about things that I couldn't share with anybody else except for
Mhm.
other people in the peer review. But I'm not going to call them up at 10 o'clock at night. So what am I going to do? Roll over to my husband and be like, hey, this thing happened. Like, I can't talk about this kind of stuff.
But that's it. When you had the peer groups, at least you were able to process, and if you had a tough case or you had something that was going on. And we know that as we're talking about, how do we be able to shut our brains off and how do we are able to rest? We have to get our physical bodies to be able to relax. We have to get our brains. Our brains are designed to process. They take everything that happened throughout the day and we need to do something with it. But if you can't share it, either one, it's confidential and you can't share it, or the people that you would normally share with don't understand it. I also have a lot of my leaders that don't want to share because they feel like that somehow makes them seem weak
Yeah.
and that they're not adequate for the role, or they don't want to ask the question, or they don't want to share that something bothered them because they're people, they need to be tough because, there's all these different realities and also self-imposed realities that all that plays out. And now where does it go?
Yes. I see that so often in my clients and clinician leaders that I work with, that there's this tough it up mentality that is part of our training, and we're rewarded for it when we're trained, right? We're rewarded not to ask for help. And if you ask for help, it's a sign of weakness. And then you put that same clinician in a leadership role, and part of their success as a leader is to ask for help and to talk with others and delegate. Then now you're triggering their nervous system. And so
Huh?
now they have all of this fight or flight that is coming up for them because they're being asked to do things that they were punished for years ago, or maybe even yesterday, not years ago. And so that compounds too. It's something that I certainly didn't realize until I'd already been through it. Like, oh, this isn't very strange. And so
Yeah.
I saw it so much in my clients that, yeah,
Well, and I think you hit on it also in the multiple roles and the multiple hats. And we know that all of this does tie into your sleep, because just to make that quick connection, obviously, when we're stressed and whenever we are experiencing real world stressors, it could even be the folks that, depending on what track they're on with work, if they're, say, for instance, a clinician educator track, that they still need to do research in order to get promoted. Well, you're doing that nights and weekends, or that's cutting into your sleep, or wanting to prove this part of your identity. Well, we know that for our bodies in general, if our body perceives that there's a threat, it's not going to let us rest. Sleep is considered a vulnerable state. And I think that's what so many people forget, is that if our muscles are tight, if we're breathing faster, if our heart's beating faster, and there could be many reasons. Maybe we climbed a flight of stairs. Maybe we're just tense because we sat in a traffic jam. But based on what's going on with our bodies and going on with our brains, if we hit a certain threshold and our brain thinks, ooh, this is similar to that fight or flight response, or when it's like this, usually something's wrong, I can't let her rest, then all of that we're trying to do, we don't even realize how it reduces our ability to fully rest or to fully relax. Like I think we talked about last time, you can have the kettle that's boiling and bubbling. And if you turn down the burner and it goes to simmering, yes, it's dropped. But simmering is very different than turning off the burner and really cooling down. And I see so many of my clinician leaders, because of all the realities of it, they go from boiling to simmering, and simmering becomes the new baseline.
Yeah.
And we don't perceive it. We're so used to stress. It's like we walked into the smoky bar and we've acclimated to it. And there's so many realities contributing to it that it's not that it's wrong what you're feeling or you're experiencing, but your body still can't get the rest it needs.
Yeah. And I see that, and I've felt this for myself too, see it in my clients, that stressful state becomes so familiar that if there's some sort of quiet or anything that's considered not in a stressful environment, then their bodies seek out that stress.
Because that's what becomes familiar, or it's, okay, this is what I'm used to. So we go into survival mode.
Yeah.
And that's when it's, all right, I know I need to be awake. I know I need to be focused. We're all just going to live on our coffee and let's have our energy drinks. And people boast of having the 2 espressos at night, but then they can fall right to sleep. Or, you know what, I'm stressed. Well, I'm going to have a couple drinks and I'm going to relax. And we actually see that for a lot of our leaders, that there are more social events. They are required to be networking and to talking with folks. And there's many more opportunities where it's not just long day, you go have a drink with friends for happy hour to relax. It's more like I'm doing 3 and 4 social events every single week and meeting with donors and meeting with these people. And so it almost becomes just a part, again, of the routine. And I think there's so many of those things that we look at it for everyone else, but it's really hard to look at it for ourselves.
How do we go from simmering to turned off? If we can't turn off the stressors that are in our lives, how do we bring our bodies and our brains into that relaxed state so that we can sleep?
So what I think is interesting, there are a number of different ways to go about it. And so what I find is that many times for my smartest listeners, if they can understand truly the mechanisms, then they may have different avenues to get there, but then they can feel like they can have control over it again. And I think that that's the first piece, is that for many of us, we just start feeling like we don't have control over it. We forget that sleep is a system. Yes, it's something that our bodies do naturally, but we do get to have control over getting our body to be able to relax if we teach it how to. That's where things like PMR, for instance, progressive muscle relaxation. I love this exercise because, one, you can do it and nobody has to know what you're doing. So I recommend it for people when they're getting ready as part of their bedtime routine. And we know that that's a really important piece, because if we don't have 2 or 3 things to trigger our brain and our body that it is time to sleep, it's never going to relax, because we're used to functioning at this high go, go, go speed, and our brain is trying to process and our body is ready. We have to have these, what I call sleep triggers, for our body and brain to know the when. And then how we create those triggers, well, something like PMR. When you overly tighten a muscle and then you quickly release it, let's think about the mechanics. You fatigue it and then you quickly release, it elongates the muscle. It relieves tension. It helps increase circulation. There are things like that we can do head to toe in less than 5 minutes. That quick drop in tension, it naturally lowers our breathing a bit. Our respiration rate slightly slows down. And as our brain is scanning to check, is there a threat? Is something going on? That quick drop, it'll trigger and say, oh, there mustn't be a threat. Okay, maybe we're not fully a burner off, but we've gone from a 6 to a 2 and we're working our way down.
Yeah.
But even that slight change, then the brain recognizes it. It changes the chemicals our body is producing, and then it helps it to be able to relax more of the way. I tell people the best thing you can do from a stress and tension standpoint is actually, instead of avoiding it, is spend a little bit of time paying attention to what's actually happening in the body. When you purposely tighten it, it's like, oh, I didn't realize I had tension in my stomach or my shoulder. Most people know, but they don't realize other places. And even that awareness helps to reduce it.
Yeah. I'm going to try that tonight. I always have tension in my shoulders. So now I'm like thinking about,
Well, you think about it, and it builds
yeah,
over time. So we're sitting here, we're having this great conversation. It's like, wait, if I do this, and hold on, why am I feeling
yeah,
tension? And
yeah.
so a lot of that residual can be from, okay, I picked up a box, or I was typing a lot, or I was driving. And so that's what keeps us in that simmering state because our body hasn't fully let go of it because it's prepared and on guard and ready to protect. So when we force it to do that and we do that every night, it's funny, you'll start doing it and everything just starts to relax because it realizes that now is the time that it has permission to
Mhm.
chill out and to
Yeah,
start to cool down. And that's why we have to do that with our bodies, but we also have to do that with our brains.
yeah.
And that's where we talked about last time, for instance, doing some of that writing before bed. It doesn't have to be formal journaling. And people don't always like that. But even as much as writing down your to do list for the next day, come on, we're going to lay in bed and we're going to think about what we have to do or what do we need to wear or what are we going to do for our families. And anything that you can write down gives your brain permission to not have to try to actively remember it when we want it to shut off. So we want to be able to do those things and teach the body and brain to naturally wind down. And it can also be things. Some people like to do certain breathing techniques. Some people will do certain focus exercises and grounding exercises so the brain can be engaging, but not engaging in what we don't want it to, versus putting on TV and listening to shows that are going to keep the brain awake. But when we're doing that and we do it naturally, that our body can produce the chemicals naturally, and it can also respond to the adenosine spikes and the melatonin and all of that. So we don't have to rely also on the substances to try to do it for us.
Yeah. I love what you said a couple times about giving ourselves permission. And I think that's something that's so key. And I feel like those are like foundational even before we start talking about any sort of sleep techniques to wind down our brain and body is it's the awareness of it and the recognition that we have to, again, getting back to what we were saying before, we have to give ourselves this permission to get the sleep that we need because we're not going to be effective if we don't.
And I think you hit it spot on is that for so many people, especially leaders, they take away that permission because they feel like, well, I have all these other things that I have to do and all these people that I'm responsible for. And either I have to get it all done right now, or I need to be constantly working and prioritizing. And yes, it's important to prioritize what's necessary, taking care of everyone else. But if you are not in a position to make the best choices and to be able to fully be present, you can't be as helpful. And it's really hard for givers and caregivers and people that generally are service oriented. It feels selfish, but it's like actually it's being less selfish to make sure that I'm in the best place to serve everyone else.
Yeah. And again, getting back to our first conversation about that sleep being the badge of honor, it's hard to unlearn that. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the content that you put out and the people that I've worked with in coaching is, again, giving yourself that permission and realizing that we can't pour from that empty cup. And it's a cliche for a reason
Yeah.
because we have to take care of ourselves and the people around us are watching. And if we're sending emails late at night or middle of the night, then it's going to send a message to our teams, people around us. That's what's expected. That's
Yes.
put them on high alert too.
Well, it does because then it's like, oh, well, did I not respond at the right time? And should I be? And then people start putting all this pressure on themselves to do it. Now, there are certain circumstances where that might be the case. Maybe somebody with family circumstances or kids or other things. Okay. But then that's when it's important to make sure that you're being explicit about why that's happening. But it's very hard to tell everyone else to prioritize it and not do it for yourself as well. So I tell my leaders all the time, I say it's really hard to be resilient when you're exhausted.
Mhm.
And so, especially in leadership roles where you have to be the one to be able to have that resilience and have that positive outlook, you need the sleep more than ever to be able to be in that right mindset for it.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that we didn't get to last time that I want to get to now is a little bit around sleep hygiene and this
Mhm.
concept of restricting your time in bed. Talk to us about that because I feel like I know the surface of it, but tell us a little bit about what that means.
This is one of my favorite topics. This was the focus of my entire TEDx talk was what we call the sleep window. And what I think is so important about this is that in general, we've created this norm that 8 hours is the amount of sleep that everybody needs. And what we know though is 8 hours is an average. There are people that need more and they barely give themselves 8 hours at night because goodness sakes, there's so much else that has to get done. And they wake up and they still feel tired. You have all these people that need less. And the older we get, we actually need less sleep, which is a whole other conversation. But maybe they wake up after 6 hours or 7 hours and they feel amazing until they look at the clock. And then they immediately feel tired because their brain said they should. And so what is so important is to understand that just like metabolism, you can have multiple people and they look the same. And one person needs 1,800 calories and one person needs 2,500 calories. And it just depends on how your body is processing food, how active you are, genetics, many things. Our sleep behaves in the same way. So what we have to actually determine is what a person's ideal sleep window is and understand how that adjusts over time. Now, in order to do that, I actually have broken down from cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, from CBTI, this process into a 4-step process that you follow. So if you want, maybe we'll jump into that a little bit.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay. Whenever I share with this, people always laugh. I love to use kind of visuals and ways to think about it. And so I say, if anybody has ever had pizza in their life, say that you have 6 inches of pizza dough, you spread it out in a 6-inch pie pan. It's nice and thick and even, all is good to go. But then you have more friends coming over. So you have to take those 6 inches and stretch it. And you can make it fit into a 10-inch pie pan, but it's not going to be thick and even. You don't have enough to fill the space. It's going to have holes and gaps. And our sleep behaves in the same way. If we have built up 6 hours of sleepiness over the course of the day, but now we're climbing in bed and we're spending 10 hours in bed, maybe it's cold outside. Maybe we want to hide from our kids. Maybe we paid a lot of money for the mattress. Maybe it's Saturday. We want to sleep in. I've heard every reason. But what happens is if we're stretching our sleepiness, of course, we're going to have a harder time falling asleep because we're not tired enough to fall asleep yet. Or of course, we're going to wake up 4 or 5 times in the middle of the night. Because if I only have 6 hours of sleepiness and I'm out that I can be asleep, but I'm in bed for 10 hours, I'm going to have times when I'm awake. And so this first thing we have to do is actually knead the dough back together. We have to actually figure out what we're currently getting and reduce the window. And then we grow it again. And the reason that that's so important is that every time we wake up throughout the course of the night, our body has to reset on the process that it goes through for sleep. And we know that at the beginning of the night, we see more of our body healing and repairing itself. And then later in our sleep, in the early morning hours, it's more time spent with our brain healing and repairing itself. But we have to get there. And so every time we wake up, we start over and go back to the beginning. And how this ties into that 4-step process is that for a lot of people, they're saying, well, but I need more time to be in bed because it takes me forever. I wake up so much. And so it seems counterintuitive. But when you actually shrink the window to what you're currently getting, now your brain learns very quickly. If I don't sleep when she's letting me, I'm not going to get to sleep and I need sleep. And so it retrains our brain and our body of when to sleep. So how we do this? Step 1 is we have to identify how much sleep we are currently getting. And so you look across your 7 days, weekdays and weekends, because a lot of people are consistently inconsistent. And we want to figure out the average. So if you're in bed and you're asleep for 2 hours and you're up for 2 hours and you're asleep but awake, only take the time that you're actually unconscious and asleep. And what you want to do is you're going to take that and you are going to total it up, get your average, and come up with one number. Now, if for any reason right now you're getting less than 5 hours a night on average, your new number is 5. We have to start with 5. We're not going to go less than that. But maybe some nights it's 6, some nights it's 7, some nights it's 8. If it averages out, let's say it's 6 hours. Okay, that might seem like too little, but we're going to start with reality. We can't pad the number with what we want to get or with what we think we need. And we need to remember that time in bed is not time asleep. So you don't count the time you're reading your book or watching TV or awake in the middle of the night looking at the ceiling solving the world's problems. Take whatever your number is, say it's 6 hours. That's our step 1 where we get to it. Then we take step 2, which is picking the window. And we do this by working backwards. So you take the earliest that you have to wake up. Maybe across your 7 days, you're up Tuesdays and Thursdays at 6 a.m. for a workout class. Maybe you're up at 6 a.m. on the weekends because you're going fishing, you're taking your kids to travel ball or whatever it is. But take the earliest time, say 6 a.m., take your number from step 1, say 6 hours, work backwards, and that's going to give you your sleep window to start. So 6 a.m., 6 hours, that means 12 midnight. Now, I'm not depriving you of sleep. You are only getting 6 hours a night. I'm just giving you a more efficient window to get it instead of wasting 4 and 5 hours awake in bed. And if 12 to 6 feels too late, we can make it 11 to 5 or 10 to 4. But we're not stretching the window just because we want to go to bed earlier and sleep in longer. We'll eventually grow it. The other key that's important to note is that we want the wake time to always stay consistent. And it's important because no matter what time you go to bed, if your brain knows when you're going to wake up the next day, then it knows how much time it has to work with. It can appropriate allocate its resources to healing the body and the brain. If it doesn't know if you're going to wake up at 5 or 7 or 10 a.m., now it's going to try to figure it out, but it's not going to be as efficient, and we won't have as much effective healing for our bodies and our brain. So step 1, what's your number right now? Step 2, what's your window? Any questions before I get to the next step?
No, that sounds super helpful. Yeah, keep going.
Okay.
Love this.
But the thing is, there's simple versus easy.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of people, they might say, oh my gosh, midnight feels so late.
Right.
How do I stay up that late? Okay. Well, I mean, again, we can adjust it. But if you think about how much time you're staying awake in bed, let's think about what we can use those extra hours for. Maybe that's when we're doing laundry or, emptying the dishwasher, or maybe we schedule a call with a friend that lives somewhere else that we've been wanting to fit in. Maybe that's when we do our meal prep. But what happens too is when you get on this consistent schedule where you're sleeping from 12 to 6, now you have enough energy that you don't feel as tired and you're not dragging as much for those last few hours after you get used to it. And the folks that on the other end see, well, 6 a.m. is so early. But if you're waking up and you feel fully rested, there's so much more that you can get done in your day. Yeah. And if you want it to be later, like instead of 12 to 6, we could even make it 1 to 7. It depends on where you're functioning. And if you are the person that's working a lot of night shifts, maybe we do move it. Like my folks that I work with that are leaders in hospitality industries and pilots and other industries, sometimes their sleep window might be 2 to 9. It just depends on where it fits for you and your body and what you can keep as consistent with as possible. So step 3 is the trick that we're going to stick to that new schedule for 7 days. And the way that I look at it is anybody can do anything for 7 days. And if you haven't slept well for weeks, months, and years, I'm asking for days. Yeah. We can do days. So the practicality is if 12 midnight is bedtime, you don't get in bed at 11 to read. Yeah. This is part of our sleep hygiene of the fact that the bed should be reserved for sleep and romantic activity, and that's it. When we're in bed and we're doing things other than sleeping, our brain gets confused as if it should be awake or asleep. So you can read at 11, great, but do it in the chair. Do it on the couch. This is why so many people fall asleep on the couch watching TV and wake up 2 hours later and get in bed and can't fall asleep. Yeah. Because they think that the couch is where they sleep and the bed is where they think. And also when 12 midnight rolls around, if that's your bedtime, that's not when you're reading. That's lights out, head is on the pillow, and your job is to sleep. And if you do wake up 4 or 5 times throughout that first week, that's okay. You're still going to get out of bed when 6 a.m. when the alarm goes off. And you're going to feel tired, admittedly, but that's a good thing. We're going to be excited about being sleepy because that means that when it's time to go to bed the next night, you're going to fall asleep. And if you're that person that's been laying in bed, now you're so tired that you can't wait to get in bed. And now you're asleep within 10 to 15 minutes. Yeah. That's also during that week, we're not going to take naps. Now, I do want to talk about naps for a minute because this is a big thing that I see. And there are strategic naps. I know we've talked about this before, but during that week, we purposely want to feel tired during the day. So then that way we're getting sleep at night. That's why I have a lot of my folks that, especially if they tend to work the typical weekdays, they might start this process on a Thursday. So that even if they don't sleep well, they only have to get through Friday and then they have Saturday and Sunday. So they've had 3 or 4 days of readjusting before the work week or whenever your shifts are. So something to think about what day to start it on. Naps can be great when they're power naps, 20 to 30 minutes, that quick boost of energy, but we don't want to do them every day because then our body and brain learns to count on them. And like we always said, if your mom said, don't eat a snack, you'll ruin your dinner. When you take your nap, you're reducing the sleepiness, which can reduce your amount to sleep all the way through the night. So we just want to use them strategically. But since we talked about that before, I'll leave that for now. So step 4, this is the fun part. We now get to evaluate and adjust. And what we want it to be is we want to be falling asleep within 10 to 15 minutes, sleeping straight through the night, minus a bladder break. By the time you hit about 27, the typical sleeper wakes up about once a night to use the restroom. If you wake up and go right back to bed, no problem. It's when you're up 3-4 times or when you're up for 20, 30 minutes at a time that now we're seeing the problems. So if you're falling asleep quickly, sleeping through the night, waking up and feeling rested, you're good to go. Congratulations, you've hit your sleep sweet spot. For everyone else, now we start to make the adjustments. And if you're the person that maybe you said 7 hours, but you find that you still woke up 2 or 3 times, let's be honest, maybe we padded the number a little bit because we were worried about what we were going to get. We might have to shrink the window a little bit smaller for that next week to really kind of sleep detox and defragment our sleep and then grow it. For everyone else that's now sleeping through the night, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm getting my 6 hours, but I am tired. Now we get to make the window bigger. And we're going to make the bedtime. That's where we're going to adjust. So instead of doing 12 to 6, we actually do this in 15-minute increments. 15 minutes is enough to change your entire sleep scheduling. So instead of doing 12 to 6, now we're going to do 11:45 to 6. And we do that for 7 days. And then 11:30 to 6. And we keep growing the window until we hit that sleep sweet spot where we're falling asleep quickly, sleeping through the night, and waking up and feeling rested. And now we've done the impossible. We just created more hours in your day.
Yeah.
Because instead of spending 10 hours in bed for 6 hours, you're getting 6 for 6. And now you have 4 more hours to do everything else that you didn't feel like you had time for that is so important. So that my only caveat that I do have to put in there is if I have anybody with untreated sleep apnea, I can't let them do that immediately because they have to wake up because their body's waking them up to breathe until we can get them treated with their CPAP or whatever else. So I do have to give those medical caveats, things like bipolar disorder and seizures. Sometimes we have to do different modifications. But for the typical sleeper, there's 80 to 90 years of research showing that if you set up your sleep window and you really get your body to learn when to sleep, everything changes.
Yeah. So important and so much that you just shared there. Thank you. I mean, what keeps coming up for me the bed is reserved for sleep and romantic activity. And because there's so much tendency to well, maybe that's the only place that the kid doesn't bother us or the dogs don't jump up on the bed or, this is my spot where I sit and watch TV and eat or whatever. And I feel like I'm not a perfect sleeper, but I feel like I've been intentional about making the bed not the place to hang out and watch TV and do all those. I don't take my laptop in there. I'll read a little bit before bed, but I want my brain to know that the bed is for sleep.
Yes. And I will tell people, maybe you're traveling. I have my traveling nurses and leaders for conferences and things, or depending on the situation, that if nothing else, at least be on top of the covers when you're reading or watching TV, and then deliberately shut it off and get under the covers. So again, those small little sleep triggers. I have this for a lot of my folks that are on call. Maybe they're in an on-call room and they really don't have anywhere else to be. It's okay, let me unwind my brain for a minute on top of the bed because that's the comfortable place to sit. But when I get under the covers, then that's when my brain knows. And I will have people even say it to themselves, now it's time to sleep, and do that so that they can make the modifications for reality for what's ever practical for them.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I hadn't even thought about that. I feel like I sleep really well in hotels. Maybe it's just because I'm in a new place. I don't know.
And there's nothing to bother you and nothing else that you can do.
Yeah. And usually I'm traveling somewhere where I don't need to set an alarm. So that's always nice too. What about sleep trackers?
Yes. So in general, I'm a big fan of the wearables because if we're observing something, it's going to help us to make the appropriate modification. I tell people if you had to track for 2 weeks what you were eating, you're going to start eating healthy because you want to write down an apple and got the Girl Scout cookies.
Right.
But I do have about 10% of people that I don't let do it because they become really anxious about the granularity. So we have to work through that a little bit. In general, there are two things. So one, there's so many different devices that are out there. I usually would recommend if people can consider using devices without screens, because all the flashes and all the alerts can really disrupt. Even when our eyes are shut, we can still perceive light changes through our eyelids. And when your face is that close to it and you're sleeping and now it's thinking that it's lightning or an explosion or something. So put in do not disturb mode for your trackers. There are some that are being shown to be most accurate. There's a lot of research out there looking at things like the Oura Ring, the Whoop Band, Fitbits and Apple Watches, and then it kind of goes down the percentage to like your Garmin's and things. I am cautious not to overly endorse one or the other because it depends on how consistent people are wearing it. Or you should usually wear it like the same finger, the same arm, the same spot. And it's important to wear trackers during the day as well as at night, because the four metrics that we really look at, we want to look at your sleep architecture. So we want to be able to see how much time you're spending at each stage of sleep. It's percentage that we look at versus the hour, because the way our sleep breaks down. 20 to 25% of your sleep should be deep sleep with body repair, 20 to 25% REM sleep for brain repair. We want the trackers that are going to really be able to measure your oxygen levels, your O2 sats, and see, because a lot of people, it'll drop at night. And even if they don't have sleep apnea, it makes the heart have to work harder. And for the body, it can cause fatigue. There's a lot there we don't have time to get into today. And we want to be checking heart rate variability. So that's why the day and the night is really important, so we can see the much broader range, see the exercise, see the stress moments, see the calm. When it's shorter, that's usually the indication that we're at simmering and not going fully to baseline. And then within that too, we want to be able to see the number of awakenings, because pulling out of our restful sleep, because a lot of people have micro awakenings that they don't even realize. Like the dog barks or something happens and you roll over, but it pulls you out of the restful restorative sleep. So trackers are really great as long as they're being used in that way and not creating more stress.
Yeah. Makes sense. Thank you so much. This went by so fast. It's so wonderful to have you on. It's just always incredibly helpful and useful information. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. And I will tell all your listeners sweet dreams.
Thanks. Well, where can our listeners find you if they want to learn more about you, your work?
So I have my website, my first and last name, melissamilanak.com, which has my sleep well guides, video libraries, there's all of the books and things on there. I am also on social media. So if individuals want to follow me, Instagram, LinkedIn, your typical channels, that direction as well, there's all different contact information. And if anybody wants to just do a quick consult, if they let me know that they got in touch with me through listening to your podcast, then I do a free consultation to at least help get them connected with services and things.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Great to talk to you.
Thank you.
Before you go, let me share a quick story about when I was new as a physician leader. I remember very clearly walking into a boardroom with a meeting with fellow executives, and I felt like a massive imposter. I told myself, I'm not smart enough to be here. I don't know enough about this topic. I'm not able to contribute in the way that I wish I could. I was a physician. I had an MBA. I had other leadership skills. And here I was just doubting myself incredibly. And it held me back. It really kept me from contributing to my team and to the overall organization. It took me years to develop the confidence that I needed in order to be successful in that role. And I eventually learned that my imposter syndrome wasn't about my lack of competence or my lack of skill or knowledge. I hadn't had the training that I needed in order to be successful. I've seen this over and over in my years of coaching clinician leaders that we're asked to be in leadership positions, but we haven't been given the tools and the trainings. Maybe we've gotten some leadership training, but it's rather generic and it's not meant for us. That's why I created the Clinician Leadership Compass course. This course is designed specifically for physicians, nurse practitioners, and physician associates who are in leadership positions and who are struggling with overwhelm, burnout, imposter syndrome, isolation. I created this course just for you. This course includes real coaching sessions with real clinician leaders and you'll be able to take away practical tools that you can use immediately to reduce your overwhelm and burnout. And CME is included as well. The course is now open, and when you complete it, you'll earn up to 10 AMA PRA Category 1 CME credits and the Certified Clinician Leader designation. I would love for you to be there. Go to www.thepurposefulmd.com/courses to enroll today, and I can't wait to see you inside. Thanks for listening to Designing Healthcare That Cares. If today's conversation gave you a new idea or inspired you to see things differently, share this episode with a colleague and keep the conversation going. And if you're ready to take the next step in building a thriving healthcare culture, you can find resources and ways to connect with me at drlaurasuttin.com. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not medical advice, and it should not replace care from a qualified healthcare provider. Always seek the guidance of your physician or other qualified professional for any medical questions or decisions.